Hi, my name is Kalee Eichelberger. I'm representing the National Council of College Leaders during this segment of our fall webinar on bullying. I am the co-chair of the National Council of College Leaders. I'm a senior at the University of Florida, and this year marks the 5th year of me being diagnosed with Crohn's disease. I'm going to go ahead and let our topic specialist, Maggie, introduce herself, and then a couple of our council members.
Thanks, Kalee. My name is Maggie Stoeckel, and I'm a pediatric psychologist at Seattle Children's Hospital. And through my job, I'm embedded in our division of gastroenterology. So I work specifically with our patients and their families that are coping with IBD. And so my job really is to provide that holistic care and make sure that we're addressing all of the things that can come with not only growing up as a kid and teenager, but the things that can be complicated when you're navigating that development with IBD.
Hi, my name is Matthew Herrera. I'm from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I'm a senior at Louisiana State University. I'm studying biological engineering, and this is going to be my second year as a member of the National Council of College Leaders. I'm really excited. It's a great group of people who I've come to love and meet. And this is my first year as chair of the education work group. And I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis when I was 5 years old. So I'm really excited to be a part of this webinar.
And Erin.
Hi, my name is Erin Tiffany. I'm a senior at Muhlenberg College as a double major in theater and media communications. This will be my 4th year on the National Council of College Leaders, and I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease at age 10.
To start things off, Matt or Erin, would one of you like to touch on a situation where you might have been bullied because of your IBD and how you overcame that situation?
Sure. I actually have an experience that works directly into transitions as well. During the beginning of high school, which in my area you go to high school with a lot more different people than you did for middle school. I was wearing my Got Guts band, as I do pretty much every day, and one of the girls saw it and said, "Oh, what's that for?" I said, "Oh, it's for Crohn's disease." And her response was, in a not necessarily as polite way, "Oh, that just means it's a fancy way to say I have to go to the bathroom a lot." And I was absolutely floored and kind of shut down for a while, not knowing how to handle it. I realized later, and while this isn't necessarily specifically bullying, I did not talk to this girl for a while, did not know how to address her, and eventually realized that it's not her fault that she didn't clearly understand IBD. It's because of ignorance. And so it was up to me to then go out and educate people even more.
Yeah, so I think for me, I experienced I wouldn't say I experienced bullying necessarily by definition, but I was diagnosed when I was 5 years old, so I've kind of always known IBD. And growing up in middle school, especially, I didn't like to share it a whole lot because I didn't really think it was something that people really cared about or needed to know. I only really told my close friends in a small friend group, and I think the closest I would ever come to really bullying would be, a lot of times as guys, you kind of like to joke a lot about things, and I think the lighthearted jokes about my disease and about my illness were the most that I've encountered. But as a patient, that can still be kind of annoying at times and frustrating because when people joke about something that they don't really understand completely, you get frustrated. And I've tried to cope with that by just, informing them about what IBD is and trying to help them understand what my illness is and how it affects me. Because, I wanted to kind of limit my chances of getting bullied. I think most people with IBD want to do that. But it's important to, when you are open with people, to educate them and tell them what IBD is so they can understand.
Definitely. I think there's a lot of fear about what would happen if, these group of people found out I have this disease, because unfortunately IBD does have a lot of embarrassing symptoms, like going to the bathroom. And there's kind of a stigma about it being a poop disease, and it's so much more than that. I know in middle school and high school, I really struggled with my weight. I lost a lot of weight pretty quickly, and girls can be mean, especially around that time. And, there were rumors that I had an eating disorder and that's why I wasn't eating as much. And that's why I was losing weight. And a lot of times that lack of education and lack of knowing what's actually going on is the worst than what will happen if you're just open about the situation. But unfortunately, not everyone is mature and accepting about IBD, and situations might occur where people don't respond as well to finding out you have Crohn's or colitis. So Maggie, could you just give a little bit of context about IBD and bullying and what recommendations you might have for patients?
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Kalee. It's great to hear from all of you about your experiences with what you chose to do in response to potentially negative comments. I think one thing that from the initial diagnosis I like to talk to my patients about is whether or not they want to share their diagnosis with their friends, because I think many kids are terrified for people to know what's going on with them for fear of what comments might come out of that. But like Kalee was saying, oftentimes hiding it can make things worse and can actually be more detrimental than just being open about the diagnosis. On the flip side, though, I will say that sometimes that can backfire, and kids are not always so nice. And so my other task with the kids and teenagers I work with is to have them be prepared for potentially negative comments when they do share information about their IBD, and being prepared for how they want to respond to that, whether it means walking away or going to an adult, or just having a few sentences planned for how they want to talk with peers that may be targeting them in a negative way. I think the biggest thing is just having that open dialogue and making sure that a kid in particular, a young middle schooler, for example, is comfortable with the adults they have around them to go to talk to when they're feeling like they're being bullied.
Well, thank you, Maggie. Theoretically, the transition from high school to college, individuals become more mature. However, because we have that newfound sense of independence, being away from our parents for the first time in college, peer pressure definitely becomes more of an issue. So, Maggie, would you mind just adding a little bit about how peer pressure can be an issue when it's tied in with IBD?
Yeah, thanks, Kalee. I think, first of all, I think it's important to talk about peer pressure in terms of positive and negative peer pressure. I think we forget to talk about the positive stuff sometimes. And in terms of positive peer pressure, I think when making that transition to college, it's so important to create that network for yourself of peers who will be your advocates and remind you of how you need to prioritize your health in the face of negative peer pressure. Because I think when college starts, there's probably going to be more pressure to stay out late and drink, for example, or do other things that aren't so great for your health. And it's important for you to advocate for yourself in the face of that negative peer pressure. But even more so in college, when you have IBD, it's important to have friends who will remind you, hey, like you should probably pay more attention to what's going on with you, or hey, see what time it is, just to remind you of your values and how you can best stick up for your health. So I think I like to just remind my patients of that positive peer pressure when they're moving on to college, and to make sure that they have that solid peer network.
Definitely. It's so important to find those group of people that will hold you accountable and just know your limits, know your disease, and don't push you to do things that might impact your health in the long run. It's also equally important to figure out how to combat those situations where you might come into contact with negative peer pressure. Would one of y'all like to talk about a situation in which you come into contact with negative peer pressure and how you overcame that?
Yeah, I'll go first. I think being in college, you run into a lot of things that you would never experience, growing up, like alcohol and partying and that kind of thing. So that's obviously a huge negative peer pressure. where I am, partying is a big thing. A lot of people like to go out and party on the weekends, and I'm always kind of asked, hey, you want to go out tonight, or you want to, go drinking or something like that. And I have to kind of stop and recognize my limits as an IBD patient and understand how it affects my body. But like Maggie said, it's important to kind of surround yourself by people who are a good network for you and who understand you as a patient. But I try to cope with that by surrounding myself with those people, but also by just understanding myself and understanding my limits, and just being as disciplined as I can, which isn't always easy. But having those people there with you definitely helps.
Yeah, similar to what Matt said, obviously when you hit college, depending on your university, a lot of partying and drinking and things like that. And I think the biggest thing is understanding your limits. I know personally, especially leading up to one of my Humira injections, I really slow down and need to recoup a lot. And so I think the biggest help for me is understanding that. And I have a lot of friends who, strangely enough, know when my Humira shot is due every 2 weeks, and make sure that we have other activities planned to go out or just go get some food at the diner, or just hang out and watch some Disney movies. So I think surrounding yourself, like Matt said, with the best kind of people. I know for one specific example, I was really sick one night and didn't think I was going to make it to show choir rehearsal, which in college goes till 1 a.m. And I felt bad about that since we had a big concert coming up, and my show choir actually came to my apartment with Crohn's friendly foods and just sang to me, and then went off and did rehearsal on their own because they felt bad that I felt bad about missing rehearsal. So.
Hey, thank you for sharing your stories. I guess we can end with any final advice. So Matt and Erin, what have made you strong IBD role models for people beginning the transition from high school to college, and what has helped you the most along the way?
I think for me, since I was kind of diagnosed at a younger age, like I said, I've been able to kind of develop perspective on, being a sick person, which I think is an important perspective to have, because a lot of people, don't really go through some of the things that we go through as IBD patients. So when you meet people who are transitioning in college and who are going through some of the things that you've been through, it's cool to have that perspective to be able to share your story with them and relate to them in a way. And so I think that's kind of how I can be a role model for someone. And just being like a positive influence for them, saying, hey, you're going to be okay. I've been through this. And being able to relate to them is really important.
Yeah, just to agree with that. I think the most important thing is to know yourself, understand your body and your limits, and how many credits can you really take in a semester, and what would happen if you got sick. Just always kind of have a backup plan. And as we've said, to really surround yourself with the best kind of people. There are also resources everywhere. I know through the National Council of College Leaders, you can find IBD patients in your area that have gone through the whole college thing as well. So just reach out and take care of yourself in the best way possible.
Definitely. I think the biggest struggle for me has been not comparing myself to my classmates that don't have IBD, and just really learning and accepting that it's okay to go at my own pace and to not get mad at myself for having IBD. And I think the kind of motto that I live by is to not let my disease define me, but instead let it drive me. And it's taken me to some unbelievable places that, I wouldn't have been down if it weren't for my disease. So just learning to accept that and learning to appreciate that, because it's out of your control, unfortunately, and it's something that you can't change. So just really accepting that and knowing your limits and knowing yourself, I think, is really key in the situation. Maggie, do you have any final words of advice that you might give patients that we didn't address?
Yeah, well, first of all, just thank you for having me as a part of this webinar. I feel really thankful to be a part of this community and to hear hear from all of you about your experiences, because that's really what's important here. I think one of the biggest things that I like to talk with my patients about is just acknowledging that you really are the expert on your body and on your disease and how you generally just want to live your life. I think it can be really easy to feel like you're at the whims of all the professionals around you and just at the whims of your disease. And when you really step back, you are in control, and you are the one that can feel empowered and can drive how things go. So just reminding yourself of that is so important.
Well, thank you so much for everyone watching, and thank you, Maggie, for joining us. We really appreciate your advice and your expertise. To everyone watching, you can find more information and additional resources on our CCFI website. You're not alone in this journey with IBD. We have a number of great programs like the Power of Two, the IBD Help Center, support groups in your area, and contact information to find out more. So thank you.